This might be the deepest Oregon football NFL draft class I have ever seen. Is Bo Nix a perfect fit in Denver? We're going to answer that question and many more. Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. So if you have not already, please like, comment, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to or watch this show, which today is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. And I'm not alone today for some Oregon NFL draft talk. Max Chadwick of PFF joining me here today for all the film breakdown you could possibly want or need. Let's hop into it, Max. Great to have you back here on the show. Bo Nix. I just see him in a Denver Broncos jersey, and I think it is perfect. I think Sean Payton and Bo Nix are a perfect marriage. Russell Wilson's not there, which as a Seahawks fan is just a crazy, crazy thing to see. But is Bo Nix as perfect a fit with the Broncos as I think he is in your view?
I think it's a good fit. Yeah, I think he's a guy that that Sean Payton would like a lot in that offense. Now, they are just cutting Russell Wilson. We found that out yesterday. I do think that they will be in the J.J. McCarthy sweepstakes as well. I also have heard talks about the Patriots moving out of the number 3 pick. Perhaps the Broncos will be interested in that. I know they gave up their first round pick already, but I'm kind of looking at, or I mean, not this year, but they've given up a lot of picks before to get Russell Wilson. But I'm kind of looking at that right now and saying, okay, maybe they try to move up to get Jaden Daniels, Drake May in that top 3, or maybe they try to move up and get a guy like J.J. McCarthy. I don't know if Bo Nix would go 12. I don't think that they would do that at 12. I think if they were to get Bo Nix, they maybe would want to trade back or even trade up from their second round pick back into the first round and get Bo Nix. So that's kind of where I think that the Bo Nix kind of stock is right now. I don't think he's a top 15 pick for NFL teams right now, but as a late first round pick, maybe early second round pick, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So yeah, the Broncos are certainly one of those teams that need a quarterback, and Bo Nix could be that guy for them. I don't think it'll happen in the top 15 where they are right now.
Bo Nix just had the most accurate season in the history of college football, and he was a Heisman finalist. Love the slide of the helmet right there. That's big time.
I had to get it for you, man.
Big time. You love to see that here on the show. But Bo Nix just had a great season. Only the 3rd Heisman finalist in my lifetime for Oregon football. I know Joey Harrington was a finalist back then, but I'm sorry for my older listeners or viewers out there. I don't remember that era of Oregon football. Kellen Clemens is the first Oregon quarterback that I really remember as a kid. But what is it about Bo Nix that makes you think that the Broncos wouldn't want to take him at 12, but would want to wait maybe to either trade back in the first or get him in the early second?
Yeah, I think the one thing that, I'm a little hesitant on him and why I think, I don't know if I would take J.J. McCarthy above him, but I think that's where the NFL is right now. I think it's pretty clearly that J.J. McCarthy is going to be QB4 in this class, and there's even talks about him even being higher than that, man, which I think is a little wild. But J.J.'s obviously got the age on his side. He's a 3rd-year player. Bo's a 5th-year player. Penix is a 6th-year player. Bo obviously has been phenomenal these past 2 years. I think you can say that the Oregon offense has made it pretty easy on him compared to other quarterbacks. You get an excellent offensive line that I'm sure we're going to talk about in just a second, protecting him. In fact, I think it was the best pass blocking O-line that we've seen in PFF in a few years, honestly. They were excellent protecting the quarterback. He had outstanding receivers to throw to as well. Troy Franklin, who could be a first-round pick. Tez Johnson, who's one of the 5 best receivers, 5 best receivers in college football entering next year, in my opinion. He had some really good players to throw to as well. And obviously Bucky Irving, we're going to talk to him about it, I'm sure, too. But he had a really good running back to lean on as well. So the Oregon offense, and like the Washington offense, too, really made it easy on Bo Nix. But again, he was very efficient. He played kind of point guard in that offense. Didn't really push the ball downfield as much as other quarterbacks, but he can do it. I just think that some NFL teams are going to look at a guy like J.J. McCarthy, who, for all intents and purposes, is kind of like a ball of clay that you can mold into a potential superstar. They might look at a guy like Bo Nix and a guy like Michael Penix Jr. as kind of finished products right now. And they say, okay, we can get that guy on day 2 in the second round, and maybe he could be our guy. But a guy like J.J. McCarthy, they look at it and say, oh, he's got the high ceiling. Now, I don't necessarily agree that I would maybe take J.J. McCarthy above those two, but I think that's where the NFL is right now. So I I don't know where I personally would take Bo Nix, but I would be pretty shocked if the NFL takes Bo Nix somewhere in the top, 15 or so right now.
I'd be pretty shocked if JJ McCarthy was quarterback 3.
Yeah, so
that would surprise me more than a little bit. I hear the argument of, he's got the higher ceiling, he's not quite as proven and all that sort of stuff, but if you're looking for a plug and play, I think it could be situation dependent, but if you're looking for a plug and play starter, gosh, I would take Michael Penix over JJ McCarthy in like 2 seconds.
Same.
I don't care that Michigan beat Washington in the national championship game. I've watched Michael Penix rip my heart out of my chest twice last year, and I know what that guy is capable of. But bringing this back to Bo Nix, the deep ball is something that has come up a lot with him. Fans of other schools, call him Captain Check Down, and he just doesn't push it down the field as much. Do you think that's a Bo Nix thing because he's not as capable in that realm, or do you think it's more an Oregon offense thing, and that's just how Will Stein structures his system?
It's definitely not a Bo Nix thing. I think it definitely is an Oregon offense thing. I think we're going to see the same thing this year, honestly, with Dylan Gabriel. I think that, you looked at what Bo Nix was at Auburn. I mean, it's almost insane to look at what he was in his first 3 years at Auburn compared to what he was at Oregon, because at Auburn, he was this gunslinger, man. I mean, he was taking chances down the field, making unbelievable plays and unbelievable bad plays, too. He was a roller coaster. At Oregon, he was like Mr. Efficiency. Like, he was a guy that was not taking too many chances, was putting the ball where it needed to go, was, finding his first read. He's really good pre-snap, I think, as well. He avoids, like I said, negative plays. He can actually play under pressure pretty well. I'm kind of curious how he looks in the NFL when you have to go through progressions, because he didn't really have to do that too often at Oregon. So I think that's kind of going to be a learning curve for him a little bit. I think his footwork needs to improve as well. He is starting caliber tools for sure. But again, like I said, I think that's one of the big adjustments for him going to the NFL, is that, one, he's already an older quarterback, and two, you look at him and you say, okay, how much of that production was Bo Nix versus how much of that was the Oregon offense? I do think Bo Nix should take credit for a lot of it. But like I said, I think he had a lot of really talented players and extremely talented coaches helping him out too.
Well, that's why I like the fit with the Broncos, is they were an 8-9 football team this past year. They've got some weapons on the outside. Jerry Jeudy is still there, right? And Cortland Sutton, if he comes back healthy. They've got receivers. They've had some good running backs. You've got a good offensive coach. That's one of the reasons that I like Bo Nix to the Broncos. But the other reason is the Sean Payton system. When you think about, Drew Brees and the Saints and their great run together, it wasn't a whole ton of downfield shots. It was very methodical, schemed, design plays where, hey, the ball's supposed to go here. And that's why Sean Payton didn't fit with Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson wants to ad-lib. He wants to make things happen on his own. He can't always see where the play is designed to go to because he's a small guy behind the line of scrimmage, and he didn't have incredible OCs in Seattle, so it worked. But that's the other reason I think Bo Nix is a good fit in Denver, is Sean Payton will design a play to go here, and Bo Nix, I think, understands how to read a defense and execute in a way that'll make Sean Payton happy.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think Sean Payton, he's a great offensive coach, and I think he's going to have that confidence to be like, okay, like maybe a coach that isn't as confident in his offensive play call, or maybe a defensive head coach will look at a guy like Bo Nix and say, okay, I know what I'm getting in him. Whereas a guy like Sean Payton will look at a guy like JJ McCarthy, and he might have the confidence or even hubris, you could say, to say, oh, I will be the one to make sure that guy hits the ceiling. So that's why I think that JJ might have been the preferred option for the Broncos of that area. Now, if JJ is taken by the Vikings or something like that, or the Raiders or someone, and they jump the Broncos to get him, then maybe they take a look at a guy like Bo Nix. So that's why right now I think they prefer JJ McCarthy, and obviously I think they would prefer the top 3 quarterbacks too if they could trade up all the way to get them. But if JJ McCarthy and those top 3 guys are off the board, then a guy like Bo Nix or a guy like Michael Penix Jr. makes sense to me. But I think right now I would probably pencil in JJ McCarthy to a team like the Broncos, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think the Vikings are my number 2 team for Bo Nix. I don't hate the Raiders with Devontae Adams, but I think Kevin O'Connell and Justin Jefferson, the receivers that they've got, they've always got good weapons in Minnesota. And Bo Nix showed in college that you got to be able to give him a support system at some level, and I think the Vikings are able to do that. Yeah. But Bo is not the only Oregon NFL draft prospect we're talking about today. We'll get to Troy Franklin, Jackson Powers Johnson, and all the rest. First, we get to our friends over at GameTime. You shouldn't have to worry when you buy tickets to your next big event. Maybe you want to go to the NFL draft. Maybe you want to go to a show or a sporting event near you. And GameTime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, GameTime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. GameTime's the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. You can see the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. All-in prices show your total up front, so you know you're getting a great deal before you check out, and you can buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Max, let's roll along to the rest of the Oregon NFL draft prospects. This is, as I said at the top of the show, among the best Oregon draft classes I think we have seen recently. You know, they certainly have a chance to set the record for the most draftees, but we have to see how many guys are actually taken. It's hard to discern right now with everything coming out of the combine who the number 2 Oregon draft prospect is. Bo Nix is probably first. Not a guarantee, but that's kind of the way it seems. But between Troy Franklin and Jackson Powers Johnson, everything I see is these guys just creating more and more buzz, more and more hype, especially JPJ, who we all know is a monster. He just won the Remington Award for the best center in college football. He did so for a reason. Before we get to their individual breakdowns, who do you think is drafted first?
My hot take is I think JPJ is the first Oregon player drafted in April. I think
really.
Yes, I do. Wow. I think he will be. Oh man, dude, I struggle to see him falling out of the top 20-ish. And I think there's a chance I think there's a better chance of Bo falling out of there than I do JPJ. I do think Bo could still sneak into the first round, and so could Troy Franklin. But I think JPJ is probably going to be the first player drafted from Oregon. I think he's the best interior offensive lineman in this draft. I think he was by far the most dominant center in college football this past season. I think there are some teams that need center in the top 20-ish. I know it seems like the Steelers could use him. Maybe the Seahawks could look at him too. This is a guy, man, he was excellent at guard last year. And then this past season, he was the best center in the country. And you can make an argument he was the best interior offensive lineman, maybe even best offensive lineman in college football. I think he had the second best pass blocking grade in our system and the best run blocking grade. I mean, this guy is an absolute superstar. One of the best center prospects I've seen in recent memory, in my opinion. And yeah, I think this guy is pretty much a lock to go in the top 20, top 25 picks. And I just don't think you could say that about any other Oregon player right now. So I think JPJ is probably the best Oregon prospect, and I think he will be the first Oregon player taken in April.
Seahawks. Okay. Sorry, I had to let out a sneeze right there. Not that we need interior offense. Actually, we badly need interior offensive line help. I want that pick to take place so very, very badly. But I don't know. Seahawks and offensive line, hit and miss. They've had some good times as not as good times. But JPJ, I think, has the chance to be. I mean, you're just firing me up right now because I love the big fella love, and it's not as if Oregon hasn't had some guys in the trenches succeed in the NFL recently. Penei Sewell, perhaps the best example, and you know, I don't know if the Lions are looking for a center, but if he were to go to a team like that, I think Oregon fans would just become Detroit Lions fans. Because Penei Sewell is somehow even better than we all thought he was going to be in the NFL. That's the way it seems. Oh, yeah. He's ridiculous.
Maybe
absolutely
the best tackle in the league right now. Like, seriously, he's the highest grade tackle in the league. And it's an interesting thing with the Lions, too, because they have Frank Ragnow, who you can make an argument might be the best center in football right now. So they're set at center. I think both their guards are free agents right now. And like I just mentioned, JPJ was a really good guard at Oregon, too. So I think he's got versatility, man. I don't think this is a guy that has to play center in the NFL. I think if you need him to play guard, he could absolutely play guard. So if he falls that far, which I don't think he will, I would love that pick for the Lions. And I think, if you get him, Penei Sewell on that line with Frank Ragnow, it's a nasty Taylor Decker there too. It's a nasty offensive line for the Lions. So he won't last that long, I think. But I think the Lions should be interested, even though they're kind of set at center. I think JPJ could be one of their starting guards next year for sure. Yeah,
and the other thing with the Lions is that they already have a great offensive line. So it's not a need. Like that would be a luxury pick for them. And I feel like they're probably going to look on the defensive side of the ball. But when you evaluate interior offensive linemen, What do you look for in terms of a fit with a scheme? Does it matter as much where somebody goes if you're playing center or guard?
Yeah, I think that does matter. I think you look at a guy like JPJ and you say, okay, what kind of scheme does he fit? And, there's really kind of two schemes when you talk about, in terms of run blocking, especially as the gap and zone scheme. I think he's got some versatility in both. I think this is not a guy that you can really say, oh, he can only fit in this one specific offense. That's why I think he's clearly the top guy. He's first of all, he's a dominant pass blocker, and he's one of Bo Nix's best friends. They just didn't really have too much interior pressure this past season. But I also think this is a guy who could play really well in a zone scheme, especially. I love him on the move. He is a little worse on gap play, so maybe you look at a zone scheme and say, okay, maybe he'd be a lot better there. So I think he's a guy that has some versatility. Like I said, he could play guard or center. Probably want him in a zone scheme more than the gap scheme, but I do think this is a guy that is, the best interior offensive lineman by a good bit in this draft, honestly, and a guy that I would spend probably a top 20 pick on, honestly.
That is some high praise. And you know what? We're here for it. He's also an awesome guy. Like his personality. He's got a burger named after him at a restaurant somewhere.
Dude, I saw. It looks like an incredible
brisket,
burger.
mac and cheese.
Yeah.
It's a big fella burger. That's what the name of it should be. The big fella burger. But let's talk about the other Oregon player who could be a first round pick. I could also see Troy Franklin sliding into the early second, depending on fit. But what is the NFL community like most about Troy Franklin?
He's a smooth player, man. He's a taller receiver. Now, the big thing with him is weight. He's a very, very skinny, lanky player. I think he's about 185. I think he came in.
He was skinnier when he got to Oregon, let me tell you.
Oh, dude. Yeah. But what I love about him, he's a smooth, like I said, long, smooth strides, really good hands catcher. You don't really see, of course, the strength can affect him sometimes, but he goes up for it for just, contested catches. He gets those. He puts his nose into the run game, too. So, the thing with him, too, he didn't really run a very diverse route tree at Oregon. Really, there's a lot of vertical routes. I don't think it's because he can't do them. So I'm interested in seeing what he could do in the NFL. But, yeah, I like him a lot, man. I think our comp in the PFF draft guy was Christian Watson. I kind of see a little bit of that in his game. I don't think he has as much of a hands issue as Christian Watson did coming out of college. But I do think Troy Franklin – he's kind of a victim of playing or being in a loaded wide receiver class. And I think, there's guys that, you could talk about like 8 or 9 receivers that have a legitimate case to go in the first round. He's definitely one of them. But if so many of them come off the board, that just means other positions start getting pushed down. And all of a sudden you say, okay, do we want edge 2 in this draft or do we want wide receiver 9 in this draft? Like, I think that's the problem that Troy Franklin would have. So I agree with you. I think he's definitely a first-round caliber player, and I wouldn't be shocked if he's taken in the first round. But because of how loaded this receiver class is, I could see some teams saying, okay, let's wait on him. Let's try to get one of the top players at another position, and then see if we can get Troy Franklin early in the second round. So I think he's going to be a top 40 pick at least. I just don't know if he's quite going to be the first-round receiver, basically because of how good this receiver class is right now.
I've talked about this with my brother on multiple occasions. I want him to go to the Chiefs so badly. I think everything about that is such a good fit. I mean, what Marquez Valdez-Scantling was doing this past year, Troy Franklin, I think, is a better receiver than MVS, and he is that guy that stretches the field, pushes it down. They don't have Tyreek Hill. Of course, it doesn't matter. They win the Super Bowl anyway because Mahomes is just insane, and Andy Reid is very good. But the Chiefs and the Bills, in order, those are the two spots where I most want to see Troy Franklin end up. Where do you think he pops?
Oh, the Chiefs would be outstanding because they need a vertical threat. And I know there's a lot of people talking about Xavier Worthy too, but Worthy's kind of scary, proposition for me a little bit. I understand he ran a 4.21, but I think Trevor Sikkema, our lead draft analyst, put it best. It's like, dude, don't count the speed twice, man. Like, we knew Xavier Worthy was a superstar or a super fast receiver coming into the combine. And yes, we didn't know if he would break the record or not, but don't count it twice. So I still think Xavier Worthy's more of like a second round player. I do think he'll be taken first round now because of that speed. But yeah, I think a guy like Troy Franklin, he's got the speed, he's got the athletic ability. They need that in the offense. Xavier Worthy has drop issues too that I think, the Chiefs have had problems with that before. I don't know if Xavier Worthy would be the guy to really fix that. Troy Franklin doesn't really have that many concerns with his hands. So I would love that, honestly. I think he's definitely a guy that Chiefs would be looking at 32. I think they're going to take a receiver probably at 32. And Troy Franklin, like I said, he might be pushed down the board enough to be there. I love the Bills too. It's another great one. I think Gabe Davis is probably on his way out there. I think Troy Franklin's a very natural replacement for him. Again, he's got to put on some weight, but I do think he could be a really solid, really good wide receiver 2 for an NFL team. And, for a team like the Chiefs or the Bills, that's something that they could really use right now.
Yeah, and, the Bills is an interesting one because Stephon Diggs hasn't always been happy there. So if he gets pushed out one day and they move on from Gabe Davis and Troy Franklin could be Josh Allen's number 1 receiver, big arm with a guy who's got lightning speed and runs the deep ball as well as anybody in the draft. Yeah, I think that could be a really, really good fit. We still got 3 more guys to talk about that are most likely going to get drafted, but not guaranteed, but probably not going to be in the first couple of rounds for the Ducks. eBay Motors is a first-round quality grade as a company, though, because passion, drive, and patience, what brings home the winning trophy, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number 1 ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Unlike NFL draft selections, which are not guaranteed to fit, but you certainly hope they are. With eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. All right, let's wrap up with the final 3 of Oregon's NFL draft prospects in this 2024 class. Bucky Irving, Kyrie Jackson, Evan Williams, running back, corner, safety. Let's start with Bucky Irving. I loved watching Bucky in college. His lateral movement, I think, is the best that any Oregon running back has had since LaMichael James, and he has a very unique and distinct style. He's just a hard guy to tackle. He's really, really hard. I have not been as high on his NFL draft prospects. Maybe that is because I watched LaMichael James not have a great NFL career, and Barner was, mostly used as a return specialist, whereas LeGarrette Blount had the best of that 2009 Oregon running back room. LeGarrette Blount had the best NFL career as a running back. So when I look at Bucky Irving, I see, okay, lateral quickness, elite. High-end speed, okay. Size, little undersized. He does not pass block, at all. You guys at PFF are very low on him in the pass blocking department. That's kind of where I feel with him. That feels to me like a late round pick, 4th round at the earliest, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was a 5th or 6th situation. What do you make of Bucky Irving and his NFL draft prospects?
Man, I loved him at Oregon. And real quick, I know you mentioned those 3 guys. The other guy I think we'd be remiss if we didn't bring up was Brandon Dorlus, too. I think he's a guy that could go probably in the top 2nd or 3rd round. Honestly.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah, he was probably the next one.
But yeah, I think Bucky, man, I loved him at Oregon. He was such a good tackle breaker. The problem was, and I think this is why he's going to fall down boards a little bit, his combine was not good. And he was a guy that, is already an undersized back. He's 5'9", 192 pounds at the combine. So he's an undersized back. And it just didn't really blow anyone away at the combine. He ran a 4.55 in the 40, had a 9'7" broad jump, 29.5-inch vertical. This guy named Kentley Platt does an excellent job, and he kind of puts all of your measurements together that you get at the combine into one athletic score compared to past players at your position. Bucky Irving tested out in the 37th percentile for a running back. So this is not a guy that has, first of all, he's, like I said, undersized, and he's not really that athletic of a running back either. Before, if he had a great combine, I would say, yeah, this guy could go 2nd round potentially. Now, I think he's more of a 3rd round type of player, which is still really good. And I still think he could, be taken by a team and as kind of a rotational running back. But yeah, unfortunately, that was one guy at the combine who just he really, his stock was lowered, I think, and I think he was probably the biggest loser of any running back in attendance because of his combine. I
think the good news for Bucky though is that this is not a deep running back class. It's kind of Blake Corum. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Who else is out there really? He might just be the 2nd or 3rd running back off the board because there just aren't that many elite running back prospects.
No, absolutely not. Yeah, Blake Corum, Jonathan Brooks, I believe, is our number 1 running back right now. The guy from Texas. We like Jalen Wright too. Speaking of combine, he had an excellent combine. Trey Benson had a great combine. But yeah, I think even with the bad combine, I still think Bucky Irving could be one of the first 5 running backs off the board. It's just before, I would say, he was a very maybe late second round prospect. Now I think he's solidly a maybe late third round prospect right now. I do still think he should be a day 2 pick, but there's a chance that he could fall to the 4th round of the draft and not day 3, which is something that it sucks because, like I said before, I really love his tape, but man, you got the undersized part of it, and he's not an explosive athlete either. I know the tape is great, but I don't know. I just think some NFL teams might be scared off by Bucky Irving.
I think he reminds me of an offensive Verone McKinley. McKinley led the country in interceptions. He was fantastic. He was arguably the best player on that Oregon defense after Kayvon Thibodeau, and then I haven't heard much from him in the NFL space because it's cutthroat sort of industry though. I'm glad you brought up Brandon Dorlus because I definitely had a moment of what my high school government teacher, Mr. Noble, would call cerebral flatulence in just leaving him off of my mind as an Oregon NFL draft prospect. Because after I think we both agree the first 3 picks are Bo Nix, JPJ, and Troy Franklin in some sort of order. Yep. Dorlus is Dorlus probably the next one to come off the board for Oregon?
Ooh, good question. I think it might be Kyrie Jackson. I think Kyrie Jackson could sneak into the 2nd round. Dude, speaking of, talk about Bucky Irving as a loser of the combine, Kyrie Jackson was a winner. He had, speaking of that athletic score, he tested the 97th percentile for corners at the combine. Ooh. He's an athletic player, press man corner. I love
physical, very, very, very physical corner.
Yes, and sometimes when you see press corners, you see them and they don't have great athleticism, so that's why they're press corners, because at the line they got to jam the receiver, and then they want to jam him enough so they don't have to use their athleticism to keep up with him because they don't have it. He's a guy that has the athleticism, so he's a guy that can jam receivers to the line, and then even if they get past him, he has the makeup speed to keep up with him. So I was blown away by his combine. I knew he was an athletic corner to begin with, but now, right now he's a 2nd round prospect on PFF's big board right now. So I think
2nd round for Kyrie Jackson.
That Trevor Sikkema has him 50. Now he's updating the big board. I don't know if this is final or not, but he's right now 58 overall on our big board. So there's a chance he goes in the 2nd round right now.
Wow, that's crazy. I mean, he was very good this past season.
Yeah.
But did I have him as just a touch behind Gonzo? I mean, Gonzo last year. Yeah. You talk about a stud in Oregon, churning out defensive back prospects in the 1st and 2nd rounds. Yeah, I'm here for all of that sort of stuff. But I want to go back to Dorlus for a sec because I have a question for you. I thought at Oregon, Brandon Dorlus was at his best when he played on the interior. Mm-hmm. But I heard that he has shed weight and is going to play a defensive end spot, kind of the way Jordan Birch is going to for the Ducks this season, someone else who will be an NFL draft selection next year. Where do you see Brandon Dorlus fitting in the NFL?
Ooh, I think he's probably. I agree with you. I think he's a guy that I would want on the interior. I know he played around 290 at Oregon, which is really big for an edge defender. So I think he's a guy that I probably want on the interior. He's got positional versatility though, which is something that's really good. He ran a 4.85 in the 40, which is really good for an interior player, not as great for an edge defender. So I would agree with you. I think Brandon Dorlus is better as an interior player, but man, he's been a productive player for Oregon for a few years now, honestly. So I really like him. I think he could be a 3rd round prospect in this draft, honestly. I think he's a guy that, like I said, has versatility. They could play both, but I agree with you. I think his best spot long-term is probably at defensive tackle.
Yeah, I just think that his hand movement is his best trait. His footwork is outstanding, but the way that he just doesn't let an interior offensive lineman get his hands on him, and then the quickness that he has to work around the inside, he'd blow up running plays. He's got, I think, a pretty solid get off, but his hand movement really is what always stood out to me and why he was such an impactful player for the Ducks over the last couple of seasons. And last guy to talk about who, I think can get drafted. I don't know if he will, but it's Evan Williams, the safety. He had a 2nd-team all-conference selection in the Pac-12 this past year. He, I think, like his brother Evan, was most effective in the run game, but he was better than Bennett was in the pass coverage. But maybe that's not, he's not a Javon Holland type safety there. What do you see from Evan Williams? Do you think he gets drafted, or do you think he is an undrafted free agent?
I think he does right now. I think right now, no, he's not on the PFF big board right now. But I think you look at the consensus big boards, I think he's right around 205 or something like that, which you look at, where that would be picked. That's kind of like a 6th round prospect. So he's probably a late day 3 pick right now, if I had to guess. I love his coverage in the box. I think he's a good player in the box. And then, like I said, I think his run his run defense is really where he stands out. And I think he's a guy that makes plays in the run game, which you love to see from a safety. I think right now I probably have him as a 6th or 7th round pick right now. So I do think he ultimately does get drafted and adds to that long list of Oregon players that, Khyree Jackson, Dorlus, Franklin, Bucky, JPJ, and Bo Nix. All of them, I think, do end up going in the NFL draft, but I do think he is solidly the lowest drafted out of all of those guys right now.
Yeah, the only other guy that could get drafted, and look, Jordan Riley got drafted last year. I was definitely not expecting that, but kind of the opposite of him is Stephen Jones, who's a 6th-year offensive lineman. Not perhaps the most athletic, but he's just so big. Is that something that gets him drafted, or do you think he makes an NFL roster probably as an undrafted free agent?
I would probably say undrafted free agent right now, but he was a really good pass blocker for Oregon this past season. Everyone really was. He had a 90.8 pass blocking grade for PFF. And again, I don't know if he does end up sneaking into the draft, but I love what he showed on tape this past season. I don't think he ultimately does get drafted, but if I'm an NFL team and he falls out of the draft, he's probably one of the first calls I make if you want to get some more, beef in your interior offensive line room. Because I think he was a really talented player that kind of went under the radar for Oregon this past season when you talk about guys like JPJ and other players in the offensive line like Cornelius and Josh Connerly. I think Stephen Jones was a guy who really went underrated in that unit. And I think he is a really talented pass blocker that really shined in that area this past season.
Fantastic stuff as always. Max Chadwick, you can get him on X, formerly known as Twitter, at MaxChadwickCFB. He is of Pro Football Focus, breaking everything we could possibly need to know down here today. Max, thanks so much for stopping by. We appreciate it.
Of course, dude. Thanks for having me on again.
Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.